Imagine living in one of the wealthiest, most powerful nations in the world. The skyscrapers of New York gleam under the morning sun. The federal buildings of Washington, D.C. stand tall and majestic. The military is stationed across the globe. And yet, despite all this power, despite all this wealth, one morning you wake up and hear the shocking words on the news. The federal government is shut down. It doesn't sound real, does it? Governments aren't supposed to just stop. A nation of more than 330 million people shouldn't suddenly run into a wall because leaders couldn't agree. And yet, in the United States, this has happened not once, not twice, but more than 20 times over the past half-century. A government shutdown isn't a holiday. It's not a snow day. It's not some kind of scheduled pause. It is a grinding halt in the operations of the largest employer in the nation, triggered not by natural disaster or war, but by political deadlock. Federal workers sent home, museums closed, families uncertain about their next paycheck. The first time you hear about it, you might wonder, how is that even possible? How can the machinery of government, this enormous, complicated, powerful system, simply close its doors? The answer lies in the way the US government is structured, how it funds itself, and what happens when people in power refuse to compromise. In this video, we're going to explore exactly what a federal government shutdown is, why it happens, the history behind it, and the consequences it has on both ordinary people and the broader economy. We'll walk through real stories from the workers who live through it and the political leaders who shape it. And only at the very end, after we fully understand the mechanics, will we step back and ask, what can we, as individuals, learn from this? Because first and foremost, this is a story about how governments function, how conflicts play out, and how something as abstract as a budget can ripple into the daily lives of millions of people. So let's begin. Why shutdowns happen? At its core, a government shutdown is about one thing: money. Every year, the US government must pass a budget to fund itself. Think of it as the largest financial plan in the world. It covers salaries for millions of workers, funding for national parks, healthcare programs, defense spending, scientific research, and much more. Here's how the process is supposed to work. The president proposes a budget. Congress debates, amends, and passes funding bills. The president signs them into law. If all goes smoothly, the government has the money it needs to operate for the next fiscal year. But when there's no agreement by the deadline, usually October 1st, funding runs out. Without legal authority to spend money, non-essential parts of the government must shut down. Why does disagreement happen? Because budgets are not just numbers, they're values. They reflect what a society prioritizes. Should more money go to defense or education? Should taxes be cut? Or should spending rise to support healthcare? Each political party brings its own vision, and when those visions clash, the budget becomes a battlefield. Sometimes, shutdowns occur because of narrow, specific disputes. In 2013, it was about the Affordable Care Act, often called Obamacare. In 2018, 2019, it was about funding for a border wall. Other times, it's about the broader size and scope of government itself. Deadlines make the drama worse. If Congress and the president can't strike a deal by midnight on September 30th, agencies legally lose their funding authority. And without that authority, the doors close. It's important to note, not everything shuts down. Essential services like national security, military operations, air traffic control, and emergency medical care continue. But millions of workers in non-essential roles are either furloughed, sent home without pay, or required to work temporarily without pay. So in short, government shutdowns happen because the people responsible for funding the government cannot agree on what the government should do. Historical background. Shutdowns began in the modern sense after a 1974 law restructured the federal budget process. Before then, disagreements could cause delays, but they didn't automatically force agencies to close. That changed when the rules became stricter. No funding, no operations. The United States has since experienced more than 20 shutdowns of varying lengths. Some lasted just a day or two, others dragged on for weeks. One of the most famous early examples came in 1995-1996, during President Bill Clinton's administration. A conflict with House Speaker Newt Gingrich over spending priorities caused two shutdowns, the longer lasting 21 days. Government services halted over the Christmas and New Year holidays, frustrating citizens and damaging the reputation of Congress. In 2013, under President Barack Obama, another major shutdown occurred, this time lasting 16 days. The central issue was funding for the Affordable Care Act. During this time, hundreds of thousands of federal employees were furloughed and national parks closed, costing local economies millions in lost tourism revenue. But the longest shutdown in U.S. history took place from December 2018 to January 2019 under President Donald Trump. Lasting 35 days, it was triggered by disputes over border wall funding. Roughly 800,000 federal employees missed paychecks, with many struggling to pay rent or buy food. Some worked without pay, TSA officers at airports, prison guards, and other critical staff. Stories circulated of families visiting food banks, workers driving for rideshare companies to make ends meet, and growing frustration across the country. Every shutdown adds to a timeline of dysfunction. Each one reflects not just policy disagreements but also political strategies. Shutdowns have become bargaining chips, a way for one side to pressure the other by essentially holding the government hostage. The history of shutdowns is, therefore, both a history of American politics and a history of its divisions. And while the specifics vary, healthcare, immigration, spending caps, the pattern is the same: deadlines, deadlock, closure, and eventual compromise. How a shutdown works in practice. So what actually happens when the government shuts down? The answer depends on what kind of shutdown it is. There are full shutdowns, where funding bills have not been passed for multiple agencies, and partial shutdowns, where only some areas are affected. When the clock strikes midnight without a budget deal, federal agencies begin their shutdown plans. Workers are divided into two categories: essential employees, such as military personnel, border security, law enforcement, and healthcare workers in federal hospitals. They must continue working, though they may not be paid until the shutdown ends. Non-essential employees, such as most administrative staff, research scientists, and park rangers. These workers are placed on furlough, sent home without pay until funding is restored. The impacts are visible quickly. National parks close, leaving tourists stranded. Museums and cultural institutions lock their doors. Research projects grind to a halt. Routine services, like passport processing, slow down or stop. In some cases, even high-profile symbols are affected. During the 2013 shutdown, images of closed gates at the Lincoln Memorial spread across the media, becoming a metaphor for political dysfunction. For workers, the practical consequences are harsh. Paychecks are delayed. Health insurance and retirement contributions can be disrupted. Morale plummets as uncertainty drags on. For the public, services they often take for granted become unavailable. Business owners who rely on tourism near national parks lose revenue. Travelers face delays at airports as unpaid TSA officers struggle to show up for shifts. Families awaiting federal loans or grants are forced to wait. And even when the shutdown ends, it takes time to restart. Agencies face backlogs of paperwork, delayed projects, and exhausted employees. The ripple effect lingers. In short, a shutdown is not an abstract political fight. It is a very real, very visible halt in daily operations that touches lives far beyond Washington. Consequences on people and the economy. The human consequences of shutdowns are perhaps the most striking. Imagine being a federal worker, suddenly told, "Go home. We can't pay you until politicians make up their minds." Your bills don't stop. Your rent doesn't pause. But your paycheck does. During the 2019 shutdown, countless workers lined up at food banks for the first time in their lives. News outlets carried interviews with tearful parents struggling to explain to their children why groceries were suddenly scarce. For many, the shutdown meant financial emergency. And it doesn't just affect federal employees. The economy suffers too. Tourism collapses around closed national parks. Small businesses that rely on government contracts lose work. Consumer confidence dips as citizens worry about instability. Billions of dollars are lost, much of which is never recovered. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that the 2018-2019 shutdown cost the U.S. economy $11 billion, including $3 billion that was permanently lost. That's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. That's rent unpaid, businesses closed, dreams delayed. Politically, shutdowns erode trust. Citizens grow frustrated with leaders who appear unable to govern effectively. Internationally, allies and rivals alike watch with confusion as the world's most powerful nation stumbles over its own processes. The psychological cost is high as well. Federal workers often report feeling undervalued, anxious, and demoralized. Public trust in government institutions falls, and even after the shutdown ends, scars remain. In other words, shutdowns aren't just political theater. They leave behind very real damage: financial, social, and emotional, political and social dimensions. Finally, we need to understand the broader political and social dynamics of shutdowns. Over time, shutdowns have evolved from rare accidents into deliberate strategies. Political leaders sometimes use them as bargaining chips. By refusing to fund the government, they hope to pressure the other side into giving concessions. But this strategy comes at a cost. Shutdowns often backfire. Public opinion usually turns against those seen as responsible. In 1995, it damaged Republicans in Congress. In 2019, polls showed the public largely blamed the president. Yet despite these risks, shutdowns remain a recurring feature of American politics. Why? Because the stakes are high. Budgets are moral documents. They reflect not just accounting, but values, what a society cares about, what it funds, and what it cuts. And when values clash, compromise becomes difficult. The social impact is also profound. Each shutdown highlights divisions within the country. Citizens argue over blame. Media outlets amplify conflict. Trust in institutions erodes. For many Americans, shutdowns feel like a symbol of a broken system, a government unable to perform its most basic function, keeping the lights on. And yet, shutdowns also reveal resilience. Essential workers keep showing up, even without pay. Communities support one another. Food banks open their doors. In the midst of dysfunction, ordinary people adapt and survive. So, shutdowns are not just about politics. They are about power, values, and the resilience of both institutions and individuals. Lessons for life. Now, after all of that, let's step back. We've talked about definitions, history, mechanics, consequences, and politics. But what does any of this mean for you, sitting here, watching this video? Here's the bridge. Just as governments can shut down, so can we. Think about it. A government shutdown happens when leaders can't agree, when deadlines are missed, when decisions are postponed. Isn't that what happens in our personal lives? We call it procrastination. We call it indecision. We call it being stuck. But the effect is the same. Life shuts down. Your mind is like Congress. One side wants safety, the other wants growth. One part wants to save money, the other wants to invest. One part wants rest, the other wants adventure. And when those voices argue without resolution, nothing gets done. And just like a federal shutdown, your goals don't get funded. Your opportunities close their doors. Your dreams are furloughed. The longer it lasts, the higher the cost. Time is lost, energy is wasted, confidence erodes. But here's the hope. Shutdowns always end. Eventually, leaders compromise. Eventually, the gears start turning again. And in your life, the same is true. You can restart. You can reopen. You can fund your dreams again. The lesson is this: don't let indecision become shutdown. Don't let procrastination become paralysis. The price is too high. So ask yourself, what part of your life is in shutdown mode right now? What project have you put on hold? What dream have you furloughed? What decision have you delayed so long that it's costing you more than action ever would? The United States government can afford to stumble and recover. But you only get one life. You can't waste years in shutdown. So here's my challenge to you. Make a decision. Today, take an action. Reopen the government of your own potential. Because life doesn't wait. And the world needs you at full power, not shutdown. That's the full picture. What shutdowns are, why they happen, their history, their impact, and the powerful metaphor they hold for our own lives. Now it's your turn. Don't let your future be locked behind closed doors. Don't let your goals go unpaid. Keep the lights on. Keep moving. Keep deciding. Because the greatest shutdown is not in Washington, D.C. The greatest shutdown is when we stop ourselves.